I remember the way his face changed, like someone had just pulled the oxygen out of the room. One moment, the CFO was smiling, holding his usual mug of black coffee with that fake corporate warmth he used whenever cameras were around. The next, the color drained from his face as if I'd just whispered a secret he thought was buried 6 feet under. All I said was, "Can't wait for tomorrow." I didn't realize, in that moment, that I'd just stepped on a landmine buried under 2 years of lies. It was the night before the reveal of our company's biggest project to date, a $3.5 million contract that was supposed to put our division on the map. Months of sleepless nights, endless revisions, and board presentations all led to that one moment. I'd spent nearly 18 months designing the financial model that would make or break the entire proposal. My spreadsheets, projections, and compliance structures were airtight, or so I thought. That morning I was running on 2 hours of sleep, half a bagel, and pure adrenaline. We were finally here, the eve of the reveal. Everyone in the team was buzzing, double-checking decks, rehearsing numbers, prepping for the CEO's big speech. The atmosphere in the office was electric. For once, people were smiling. Even the interns looked like they belonged in a movie montage about a startup about to make it big. And then there was him, Christopher Lang, our CFO. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice. He didn't have to. When he spoke, the room listened, mostly because half of us were terrified of what he might say next. He had this calm, surgical cruelty about him, the kind of person who could destroy your reputation in a meeting and still sound like he was giving you a compliment. I'd seen him fire people mid-lunch break. I'd seen him manipulate financial reports until they made lies look like strategic projections. But I didn't think I'd ever be on his list. We were in the break room when I said it. I was pouring coffee, staring out the window at the skyline, and I just blurted, "Can't wait for tomorrow." He froze, not a blink, not a breath, just stillness. Then, like a mask slipping, he said softly, "What do you mean?" It was the kind of question that sounded harmless on the surface, but there was something in his tone, an edge I hadn't heard before. I laughed it off, said, "You know, the big day, the project reveal. The board's gonna love it." But his eyes didn't move. They stayed locked on me, scanning, calculating. He nodded slowly, forced a smile, and said, "Right, the reveal." Then he left the room without finishing his coffee. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone was stressed. Maybe he was just tense. Maybe he didn't like the phrasing. But when I got back to my desk, I noticed something odd. My access to the shared drive had been revoked. A red error box popped up when I tried to open the folder containing the final presentation deck. Access denied. I frowned, tried again. Same thing. Then I checked my email. Nothing unusual. No alerts, no updates. Except, my heart sank, an automated message at the top of my inbox. Project ownership permissions have been updated by C. Lang. That was my first warning. By 6 p.m., the entire team had been logged out of the project management portal. Only the CFO, the COO, and the CEO had access. No one said anything, but you could feel it. The confusion, the unease. Something had shifted, and none of us knew why. Around 8 p.m., while most people packed up, I stayed behind. I always did. Numbers were my language, and silence was my office hours. I plugged in my backup drive, my private one, and started pulling up the mirrored copies of all project files. I wasn't supposed to have them, but after years of watching good work get buried under bad politics, I'd learned to protect myself. When I opened the financial model, I froze. The numbers. My version showed the real projections, the ones we'd spent months verifying with external auditors. But the version on the internal server had been altered. Several line items were inflated. A few cost allocations were missing. The total margin looked too good to be true. It didn't take long to see why. Someone, recently, had doctored the model to make the project appear more profitable than it actually was, and not by accident. The changes were precise. calculated, hidden deep enough that no one without intimate knowledge of the file would have noticed. But I noticed. The CFO's reactions suddenly made sense. If those fake numbers went live tomorrow, the company would commit to a multi-million-dollar deal that could bankrupt us within a year. And the only person who could have authorized those changes was him. I checked the edit log. My chest tightened when I saw the timestamp. Edited by C. Lang, 2:17 a.m., the night before. That was it. Proof? I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, listening to the hum of the office lights. Then I did something that would change everything. I printed the original version of the model, the one with real data, and placed it in a sealed envelope with my signature and timestamp on the back. Then I locked it in my desk drawer. It wasn't just self-preservation, it was instinct. The next morning, the company was buzzing like a live wire. Media partners, investors, executives, it was chaos. I walked into the boardroom, folder in hand, and saw Christopher sitting at the head of the table, perfectly composed. The presentation was already loaded on the projector. He smiled when he saw me. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I've already won." The CEO started the meeting with the usual corporate optimism. We're on the verge of something revolutionary, and all that. Then he nodded at Christopher to walk the board through the financials. Slide 1, Slide 2. Graphs, projections, forecasts. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. And then as the CFO clicked to the final slide, projected profitability, plus 42% within year 1. I saw him glance at me across the room. A small, almost imperceptible smirk. That's when I said it again, this time with purpose. I can't wait for tomorrow. The smirk faltered, because tomorrow was audit day, and he knew exactly what that meant. When I walked out of that boardroom, I could feel my pulse in my throat. Nobody said anything, but I saw the CFO watching me through the glass wall as I left. His expression wasn't anger or fear. It was calculation, like a chess player realizing the next move was his opponent's, not his. That night, I couldn't sleep. The envelope with the real financials sat on my nightstand like a live grenade. I kept thinking about the people who'd poured their lives into that project. The engineers, the analysts, the interns who hadn't seen daylight in weeks. They trusted the numbers. They trusted me. And tomorrow, during the audit, those fake figures would either make the company a hero or expose it as a fraud. By 6:30 a.m., I was back at the office. The building was still dark, the cleaning staff was finishing their shift, and the smell of burnt coffee lingered from the night crew. My badge beeped red at first, then green. Good. Still active. I went straight to my desk, opened the drawer, and took out the envelope. It was still sealed, timestamp intact. At 8, the CFO arrived. He looked composed, crisp suit, polished shoes, that same calculated calm. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. He smiled without looking at me. "Big day." "Yeah," I said, "for some of us more than others." He stopped walking, just for a second. Then he gave a short laugh and went into his office. By 9 hours, the auditors arrived. 3 of them led by a woman named Dana, who had the kind of energy that made even senior executives nervous. She didn't waste time. "We'll start with the financial model and source data," she said, sitting down at the glass conference table. The CFO plugged in his laptop. "Everything's prepared," he said smoothly. "You'll find all documentation up to date." I sat a few seats away, pretending to take notes, but my palms were sweating. They began scrolling through the report. The fake one. On paper, it was flawless. Too flawless. The ratios were balanced to the decimal. The margins suspiciously clean. No volatility, no variance. Then Dana frowned. "Hold on," she said. "These allocations, they look rounded. Where are the raw inputs?" Christopher didn't flinch. "They're in the secondary folder." Some of the audit logs were consolidated for clarity. It was a perfect lie, clean, believable, and delivered without hesitation. But then came the question that split the air like a blade. Who verified the figures? There was a pause. Everyone looked around the table. Finally, Christopher said, "Our lead financial analyst, him." He pointed at me. 20 sets of eyes turned my way. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind blanked. He was setting me up. He wanted me to take the fall for his cooked numbers. So I did what people don't expect when they've already written your script for you. I rewrote it. "Actually," I said, calmly sliding the sealed envelope across the table, "I'd like to submit my verified copy of the financial model. Time-stamped, signed, and backed by external validation logs." The CFO's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Dana looked intrigued. "You have a duplicate version?" "I maintain a private archive for version control," I said, "in case of discrepancies." Her eyebrows lifted. "You anticipated discrepancies?" "I didn't," I said, "until last night." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the projector fan. I watched Christopher's knuckles tighten on the edge of the table. Donna opened the envelope, scanned the first few pages, and her eyes narrowed. She turned to the CFO. "Mr. Lang, these numbers don't match your submitted model." He tried to laugh. "That must be an old draft." She cut him off. "No, this one's more detailed. It contains source links and audit trails. Your version doesn't. Can you explain the deletion of the verification sheet?" The color drained from his face. "There was no deletion." She held up a hand. "Stop. The system logs will tell us." I watched it unfold like slow-motion theater. The IT administrator was called in. He accessed the server logs. Within minutes, the record appeared on the screen. File, P3's Alpha Model Dex LSX. User. C-Lang edit. Timestamp 2:17 a.m. Action, modified hidden columns. Deleted validation tab. Dana leaned back in her chair. "That's all I need to see." Christopher's mouth opened, but no words came out. He glanced around the room, looking for an ally, a lifeline, anything. Nobody met his eyes. Dana stood. "This audit is on hold. I'm escalating this to the board immediately." He tried one last time. "You don't understand. It was a formatting issue." "No," she said coldly. "It was fraud." She gathered her papers, nodded to her team, and walked out. The door clicked shut. Silence. Then the CFO turned to me, voice barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you've done." "On the contrary," I said, "I think I finally do." He stared at me for a long time, the kind of stare that promised retaliation. Then he grabbed his briefcase and left the room. By noon, the entire building was in panic mode. Executives were pulled into emergency meetings. The CEO's assistant was pacing the hallway with her headset on, whispering phrases like regulatory exposure and liability disclosure. My inbox exploded with meeting invites and forwarded emails. Then came the one that made my stomach drop. Subject: urgent internal review meeting, mandatory attendance. Time: 1:30 p.m. Participants: CEO, CFO, audit lead, lead analyst, you. The moment I read it, I knew this was it. At 1:30 sharp, I walked into the executive conference room. Christopher was already there, sitting stiffly beside the CEO, his jaw clenched. Dana from the audit team sat opposite them, her notes organized, pen poised like a scalpel. The CEO, Mr. Patterson, didn't waste words. "We've reviewed the logs. We need an explanation." The CFO started speaking before anyone could stop him. "This is a misunderstanding. The analyst must have duplicated drafts. The edits were corrective. I was cleaning the data structure." Dana slid a printed log across the table. "Your corrections removed compliance formulas and inflated margin projections by 18%. That's not cleanup. That's falsification." Christopher's voice broke. "I had orders." "From who?" He hesitated, his eyes flicked toward the CEO, and for the first time I saw fear. Real fear. The room went still. Patterson's voice was ice. "Are you suggesting I instructed you to commit fraud?" Christopher didn't answer. That silence was his final mistake. Within the hour, security escorted him out of the building. The board initiated a formal inquiry. HR launched a compliance review. and the story began spreading like wildfire through every department. The CFO caught altering numbers on a multi-million-dollar project. By 6 p.m., his office was empty, and mine had a new nameplate on the door. Director of Financial Integrity. I thought the hard part was over once the CFO was escorted out. I was wrong. The next morning, when I stepped into the building, the atmosphere felt off, too quiet. People who usually greeted me with coffee and lazy smiles avoided eye contact. Conversation stopped when I walked past. Someone actually closed a door mid-sentence as I approached the conference hallway. I wasn't the whistleblower yet. I was the ghost of the explosion. By noon, the company sent out an internal update. Due to ongoing compliance review, certain leadership changes are in progress. We appreciate your patience and discretion during this period. Corporate poetry for we're in trouble, and nobody knows who's next. 3 words in that email stood out to me. Leadership changes are in progress. That's when it hit me. Christopher Lang might have been the one caught with his hand in the fire, but he hadn't been acting alone. He never did. A man like him didn't move numbers unless someone higher up needed those numbers moved. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was the hero or just the next name on a list. The audit team stayed camped on the 15th floor for 3 days. I barely slept. I kept replaying every interaction with the CFO, trying to remember what I might have said, what I might have signed. My inbox was filled with request for clarification emails, each one sounding more like an accusation than a question. Then came the summons. Meeting with Board Review Committee, 10 a.m. No subject line, no explanation, just time, place, and my name. The boardroom felt colder than usual that day. The blinds were half closed, cutting the sunlight into thin strips across the long polished table. At the far end sat the CEO, Patterson, flanked by 2 board members I had only seen at company galas, the kind who wore their wealth like a cologne. Dana from the audit team sat near them, papers neatly stacked, expression unreadable. "Please sit," Patterson said. My throat was dry. I sat. "Mr. Hale," he began, "you've been with the company for nearly 4 years. In that time, you've developed a reputation for precision and integrity." He paused, folded his hands. "But what happened this week has placed this entire firm under regulatory scrutiny. We need clarity, and we need it now." Dana leaned forward. "You provided an alternate financial model to the auditors, one that contradicted the CFO's submission. Can you explain how you came to have that file?" "I keep version backups," I said evenly. "Every model I work on, I mirror offline. It's a habit. Data corruption, network failure, human error, that's all." "And you did this without approval?" I nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I've watched people lose months of work to bad leadership decisions," I said. "I wasn't going to let that happen again." Dana's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, but Patterson wasn't convinced. "You understand how this looks?" he said. "You had an unapproved copy of sensitive material. Then you produced it at the exact moment it benefited you most." "Benefited me?" I repeated, staring at him. "I exposed falsified data that could have destroyed this company." "Or destroyed people in it," he said quietly. It was then I realized what he meant. People in it. Not the company. Not the system. People. They weren't worried about ethics. They were worried about exposure. Dana placed a folder on the table. The logs confirm Mr. Hale's version was the original. His timestamps predate the CFO's edits by several weeks. There's no evidence of tampering. One of the board members exhaled. "Then this is clearly a breach by Lang." "Yes," Dana said, but he wasn't acting alone. Silence. The CEO's jaw tightened. "Are you implying—" "I'm stating," she interrupted, "that several approval chains for the project were overridden by executive credentials." My pulse spiked. "Which executive?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then slowly she turned her eyes toward Patterson. The air went heavy. The CEO laughed, and low, deliberate, That's absurd. Then you won't mind if we request access to your authorization logs, Dana said. For a split second I saw it, a flicker of panic behind his smile. Then it was gone. He stood. This meeting is over. He left the room. The board members exchanged looks, and for the first time, I saw something new in their eyes. Fear. Not of losing money, but of losing control. That night, the rumor mill caught fire. Patterson had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Employees whispered in elevators, cafeterias, bathrooms. The same man who'd lectured us about transparency and corporate ethics was now under review for financial manipulation. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I didn't. Because while they investigated him, I was being dissected too. Every keystroke, every email, every late-night login, all under review. HR wanted statements. Legal wanted affidavits. And half the company wanted me gone because I'd brought chaos to their polished empire. But chaos has a strange way of revealing what was already broken. By Friday, 3 department heads had resigned. The board announced a strategic pause on the $3.5 million project. Stockholders were demanding answers. The company's internal chat lit up with speculation. Some called me a whistleblower. Others called me a traitor. Then came the message that changed everything. It wasn't from the company. It was from a personal contact, one of the investors who'd quietly funded our project behind the scenes, a man named Leonard Shaw. We should talk. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Cafe Indigo. Bring nothing, just yourself. I almost ignored it, but something about that message felt deliberate, too calm. When I arrived the next morning, Shaw was already there, sipping espresso, reading the Financial Herald. He looked up, smiled faintly. "You've made quite a storm," he said. "I didn't make it," I replied. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't there." He chuckled, spoken like a man who hasn't yet realized what he's standing in. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He folded the paper, set it down, and leaned forward. Christopher Lang wasn't the problem. Patterson wasn't either. They were just cogs. The real rot's higher. Much higher. And they won't forgive you for pulling the thread. I stared at him, heartbeat loud in my ears. "How high are we talking?" He smiled. "Let's just say the board wasn't supposed to see that audit, and you've just become the most dangerous man in this company." When Shaw said the board wasn't supposed to see that audit, I thought he was being dramatic. I was wrong again. Within a week, everything that had been whispered became impossible to ignore. Emails vanished from the company servers. Meeting minutes were redacted. Project files from the $3.5 million deal were scrubbed overnight. It was like watching evidence sink into quicksand, and I was standing right on top of it. By Monday morning, my badge didn't work. I stood at the security gate, the same one I'd walked through every day for 4 years, and heard that low, indifferent beep, beep, beep. Denied. The guard looked at me, then at his clipboard. "Says you're on leave," he muttered. "Leave?" I repeated. "Whose order?" He shrugged. HR. HR didn't even exist anymore in any meaningful sense. Everyone there had either resigned, been restructured, or suddenly decided to take extended vacations. It was obvious. Someone was cleaning house. I called Dana from the audit team. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. The next call was from Shaw. "Don't go back to the building," he said immediately. "They're spinning this. You're being painted as a rogue analyst who tampered with company property." My stomach dropped. "That's insane. The logs don't matter if they disappear," he said flatly. "And trust me, they will." I sat in my car outside the building, staring at my reflection in the windshield. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry. I felt something colder. Clarity. If they wanted to erase me, I'd make damn sure the erasure left a mark they couldn't wash away. So I drove home, opened my safe, and pulled out my second backup drive, the one nobody knew existed, the same one I'd used months ago to protect the audit file. But this one contained everything. Every email chain, every approval log, every authorization from Patterson's office, including the ones marked for internal eyes only. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing proof. I sent an encrypted copy to Shaw, then another to a journalist I'd met a year earlier during a business ethics conference. She'd once told me, "If you ever find a story that scares even you, call me first." So I did. Her name was Elena Ward, investigative reporter, The National Ledger. When she picked up, her voice was low, steady. "Tell me you're not joking." "I'm not," I said. "But if you print this wrong, they'll bury us both." She exhaled. "Then we print it right." 2 weeks later, the story broke. CFO's exit uncovers wider corporate fraud. Whistleblower triggers federal investigation. My phone exploded. Calls, messages, unknown numbers. The article laid everything out. The manipulated financials, the CEOs, override authorizations, the offshore account transfers linked to board members. They'd been moving money through shell subsidiaries, inflating project valuations to boost stock performance. The $3.5 million project, it was a front, a shiny facade built on false numbers meant to prop up a failing empire. The reaction was immediate. The stock plummeted. The board was dissolved. The CEO was arrested 2 days later for falsifying financial disclosures. Even Shaw's name came up, but unlike the others, he'd turned state witness. And me, I was named in every headline. The analyst who caught the CFO. Whistleblower saves firm from implosion. One sentence that brought down a 3.5 million fraud. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like aftermath. You don't walk away from something like that unscathed. I spent months under review by investigators. Every aspect of my life was dissected. My finances, my work history, my private backups. The company's lawyers tried to paint me as an emotionally unstable employee seeking attention. They even claimed I had fabricated the files to frame the CFO, but the data didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. And eventually, neither did the people. One by one, those who'd been silent came forward. Junior accountants, analysts, assistants. They all told similar stories. Pressure to alter numbers, force sign-offs, orders from above. When the federal case went to court, the defense collapsed within a week. Patterson accepted a plea deal. The CFO testified in exchange for leniency. And when my name was called to the stand, the prosecutor asked the question that defined everything. "Mr. Hale, why didn't you walk away when you saw the fraud?" I paused, looking at the jury, the cameras, the notebooks scribbling every word, because walking away would have meant the being part of it. Silence. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. The company dissolved. Assets sold. Executives banned. The story became a case study. The fall of a multi-million-dollar firm undone by a single line item and one man's conscience. 6 months later, I was offered more jobs than I could count. Consulting firms, ethics boards, even government contracts. Everyone wanted the whistleblower, but I didn't take any of them. Instead, I joined Shaw. Together, we started a small advisory firm focused on financial transparency. Veritas Consulting. No marble lobby, no boardrooms filled with snakes in ties. Just a few honest people trying to build something real. We didn't make millions, not at first, but every client we took, every business we cleaned up, felt like a piece of balance restored. Then one morning, while reviewing emails, I saw a name I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Christopher Lang. The subject line read, "No hard feelings." The message was short. "You were right. I thought control meant power. Turns out it was just fear wearing a suit. Enjoy your freedom." CL. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The sun was rising over the city. Quiet, golden, clean. For the first time in years, I felt no anger, no paranoia. Just the kind of silence that doesn't come from fear, but from peace. Tomorrow had finally come, and this time It was mine.